Human beings have a natural tendency to desire what is out of reach. There's a certain beauty that only distance can offer, a kind of enchantment that fades in the face of closeness. What we don't have seems more perfect, more intense, more worthy of love. Not because it truly is, but because in not having it, we are free to imagine. The other, when absent, becomes a blank canvas for our deepest projections. We fall in love, then with what is intangible, what slips through our fingers, what spares us from confronting reality. It's a comfortable kind of love, but a dishonest one. While the other is away, they don't make mistakes, they don't tire us, they don't reveal their flaws. Absence protects desire from disappointment. And in this fertile soil of longing, we craft stories, idealize the impossible, paint the relationship with colors it may have never possessed. We don't desire the person themselves, but what they represent in the silence. We don't love who they are, but who they could be, if only they remain just out of reach. It's through this logic that many relationships die before they even begin. Absence becomes greater than the real possibility of love. The idea of being with someone becomes more alluring than their actual presence. Love turns from a lived experience into a fantasy. And when the other finally comes close, they no longer match the image we created. The fantasy breaks apart in the friction of everyday life. And we mistakenly call that the end of love. Absence has a hypnotic power. It turns the other into a myth. What could have been, what might have happened, takes up more space than what actually was. An unsent message, a hug that never came, a meeting that got postponed. All of it becomes eternal in our memory, painted as more beautiful than any real experience. Absence gives room to imagination. And love, when guided by imagination, rarely accepts the imperfections of real life. When someone is absent, there's no routine, no conflict. There's none of the ugliness of coexistence, no wear and tear from daily life. There's only projection, enchantment, and longing. This creates a vicious cycle where we can only love what isn't present. We don't love the other person. We love the effect their absence has on us. And that's not love, it's attachment to idealization. A craving for control, for emotional safety, for avoiding the discomfort of reality. This kind of love feeds on lack. The more the other disappears, the more desirable they become. And the closer they get, the harder it is to maintain the enchantment. There's no room for true intimacy in this type of relationship. There is instead a nostalgic, almost melancholic romanticism that turns love into memory before it even fully begins. And without realizing it, we become addicted to absence, using it as fuel for our desire. Presence is the moment of truth. When the other stands before us, with all their gestures, words, silences, and imperfections, the fantasy can no longer hold. The kind of love that survives presence must be reconfigured. It leaves behind idealization and steps into reality. In reality, no matter how rich or layered, is not always romantic. It's made of repetition, of flaws, of subtle nuances that require effort to understand. Living with someone means seeing beyond what you imagined. It's discovering details that don't fit into fantasies. The annoying habits, the different ways of loving, the emotional language that doesn't match yours. And all of that forces us to leave the passive role of idealized love and step into the action of real love. The problem is, many people give up at this point. Presence reveals the human, and the human isn't enchanting all the time. It's imperfect, and for many, the end of enchantment feels like the end of love. But real love begins right there, when the other is no longer just a character in your mind, but a whole person with both light and shadow. The love that endures isn't the one that lifts you into the clouds, but the one that grounds you. The one that faces bad days, hard conversations, and the boredom of an ordinary afternoon. Presence doesn't destroy love. It dares it to grow. And growth, my dear, hurts. Idealizing is a form of escape. When we can't handle the complexity of truly loving someone, we choose to dream instead. We prefer to keep the other at a distance, where they remain perfect, untouchable, and harmless. It's easier to love what is missing than to deal with what is overflowing. The conflicts, the confrontations, our own vulnerability laid bare. Idealization protects the heart, but isolates it from the real experience of love. This kind of escape is silent and dangerous. It leads us to repeat patterns. We fall for those who aren't available, for unresolved stories, for people who can't or won't stay. We say we suffer because of love, but in truth, we suffer from unmet expectations. The pain is real, but more often than not, it's caused by what we imagined, not by what we actually lived. And in doing so, we miss the chance to build something real, all because we fear the discomfort that comes with it. To idealize someone is to deny their humanity. It's to force them into a role they never asked for. And when they fail to live up to that imaginary part, we feel disappointed, not because they changed, but because they were never who we expected them to be. To love is to accept, and there's no room for acceptance where there's only projection. To truly love, you have to step off the stage of the ideal and plant your feet on the solid ground of presence. Only there can real intimacy begin. Being with someone, truly being with them, also means being fully seen. And that's terrifying, because with the presence of the other comes the exposure of our own shadow. We fear they'll see our weaknesses, our contradictions, the parts of us that aren't so pretty. That's why so often we sabotage love when it gets too close. We create conflict, we pull away, we build obstacles, all to avoid facing the mirror the other holds up to us. The fear of emotional intimacy is more common than we think. We crave connection, yet fear what it demands. Being with someone means lowering our defenses, removing the masks, letting them touch us from the inside. And that doesn't align with the emotional control we were taught to maintain. We prefer safe relationships, with planned distances, with limits that prevent us from going too deep. But without the dive, there's no depth. Real love begins when we stop protecting ourselves, when we allow the other in, and when we also allow them to see us on our ugly days. To love what is present is to accept that being human means being flawed, and that the other, instead of running from that, might choose to stay. That's the real miracle of love, to be fully accepted. But to experience that, you need courage. A lot of it. When we survive the collapse of idealization, something new can be born. A love that's less enchanted, but more honest. A love that doesn't live on promises alone, but on daily gestures. One that's built in presence, in listening, in touch, in shared exhaustion. A love that understands bad days are part of the deal. That knows happily ever after isn't a destination. It's a continuous act of creation. This kind of love takes work. And that's why it's so frightening. In these liquid times we live in, anything that requires effort feels too heavy. But mature love understands that depth comes from consistency. That love isn't just a feeling, it's also a decision. It's choosing to stay, even when things aren't easy. Even when the other isn't at their best. Even when you aren't either. In presence, love finds its chance to take root, to grow inward, to sustain itself beyond the rush of initial desire. This is the kind of love that transforms us, because it challenges us to become better, not to please, but to build something real together. Love doesn't end in presence. It's only then that it begins to reveal what it truly is. And for those brave enough to face it, that is the best thing that can ever happen. Loving what you have is an act of rebellion. It's swimming against the current of easy fantasies, fleeting passion, and relationships that vanish at the first sign of trouble. To love in presence is to let go of control and accept life as it is. Unpredictable, contradictory, intense, and sometimes hard. It's understanding that the other didn't come to fill your emptiness, but to walk alongside you. Above all, it's choosing to stay, even when leaving would be easier. The kind of love that survives reality is quieter, but stronger. It doesn't need empty promises or grand declarations. It proves itself in routine, in care, in persistence. And that's not a small thing. that's everything. Because despite what many believe, love doesn't fade in presence. It simply becomes more real. In reality, when embraced with tenderness, is far more beautiful than any illusion. So, my love, don't be afraid to love what's right in front of you. Idealized love is light, but lived love is deep. And it's in that depth that the soul finds rest. The love that stays is the one that faces. And those who choose to love what they have choose to grow together, even knowing that sometimes it will hurt. But oh, how worth it is.